arrested 9 people, confiscated their cars. Many of them are repeat offenders, 3 or more offenses here, 3 or more offenses up in New York. It's just becoming unacceptable for the state of Maryland to not respond to this. We talk about flu epidemics. Well, we have a smuggling epidemic going on right now. It requires this partnership. As I mentioned, I applaud the local sheriffs and county police departments, but the municipal departments are just as important to us. And obviously the state police we partner with very aggressively. And this is one of the ground zero points where we're standing right now because of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, where far too many smugglers transport their contraband. And why wouldn't you be involved in illegal cigarette smuggling? My goodness, you've got packs of cigarettes taxed at 30 cents on the other side of the river, taxed at $2 here in Maryland, $6 in New York City. And we are struggling with this problem from a regulatory standpoint. We're obviously here today, Madam Mayor, to ask the legislature to give us some assistance. I've worked very closely with Prince George's County State's Attorney Angela Brooks, who's been terrific. Last year we had 196 violations for smuggling. We confiscated more than 325,000 packs of cigarettes and 20,000 packages of other tobacco products with a retail volume of over $2 million. That's serious money, and it costs the state more than $650,000 in lost tax revenue. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. Reminds me of when the infamous Willie Sutton was asked why he robbed banks. His answer was, that's where the money is. Well, the same can be said for cigarette smuggling. Because of the disparity in tobacco taxes among the states, cigarette smuggling and illegally selling tobacco is now not only much safer than the drug trade, it's just as profitable, according to the General Accounting Office at the federal level. Smugglers buy cigarettes in states like Virginia or North Carolina, where I think the tax is 45 cents per pack, drive them up to states like New York and New Jersey, where they can sell them for about $14 a pack, or even here in Maryland for a significant profit. One carload of contraband cigarettes can net over $30,000, all of it untaxed, obviously. The U.S. Justice Department estimates that states are losing close to $5 billion a year from untaxed cigarettes being sold on the black market. And that's just the economic impact. There's also a very real public safety concern. Legal cigarettes are often sold out of the back of a truck, or are much more likely to be opened and tainted than products sold properly from stores. In addition, we know that it's way too easy for minors to purchase black market cigarettes and get hooked on this deadly addiction. For all these reasons, my office has made the battle against illegal tobacco sales and cigarette smuggling a top priority. Thanks to all of the partnerships that we've had some major successes in the last year. But the challenge, rather than going away, is increasing, particularly with recent tax increases that grow the incentives for smugglers, but do nothing to deter these illegal and dangerous activities. Just the first 6 months of this fiscal year, we've already confiscated over 180,000 packs of cigarettes and nearly 4,000 packages of other tobacco products. These products had a retail value of more than $1.1 million, representing a tax loss to the state of Maryland of nearly $375,000. In these tough fiscal times, the money could go to a lot of worthy projects and services. Every dollar counts. All of these numbers are already higher than the numbers from the same time last year. Currently, the crime of transportation and contraband, which means cigarettes that are carried through Maryland that don't have a Maryland tax stamp on them. Currently, it's a felony, which carries a $50 per carton fine and/or 2 years imprisonment and the crime of possession of contraband cigarettes is a misdemeanor carrying a $1,000 fine or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year. The legislation we're proposing today would impose a mandatory $150 per carton fine for the first offense and a mandatory $300 fine for subsequent offenses. Last year we sought similar increased penalties. Legislation passed the House of Delegates, 115 to 12. However, the Senate failed to act. This year I urge the Senate to take the lead and send a strong message that Maryland will not tolerate cigarette smugglers and illegal tobacco sales. These are crimes that not only rob our state of much-needed funds, but untraceable cigarettes too often find themselves into the hands of kids, starting them down a path of lifelong addiction and severe health issues. I hope the Senate will act on this, and the House will follow the precedent it set last year in an effort to help us win this fight. Today I'm asking the General Assembly to provide my Field Enforcement Division with the necessary tools to execute Maryland's tobacco laws and help keep cigarettes out of the hands of our kids. It's not just about state revenues, it's about the inherent public safety and health risks that smuggling creates, and we can't afford to wait any longer. Delighted that we're joined here today with an expert from the University of Maryland Center for Tobacco Regulation, Litigation, and Advocacy, Will Tilburn.
It's 9:12, so good morning. Thank you first to the Comptroller and his office for submitting this very important legislation, as well as allowing me to speak here today. The Center for Tobacco Regulation at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law strongly supports Senate Bill 69 and the Comptroller's efforts to curtail cigarette smuggling in the state. In addition to the economic impact that cigarette smuggling has, as Comptroller Franchot mentioned, cigarette smuggling and the subsequent illegal sale of cigarettes create significant public health concerns. Specifically, cigarette smuggling brings cheap cigarettes into the state. And these cheap cigarettes lure youth and new users to adopt cigarette smoking habits, as well as making it harder for existing smokers to quit. Specifically, cigarette smuggling delivers large quantities of cheap cigarettes into Maryland, and economic research clearly shows that youth are extremely vulnerable or sensitive to price fluctuations. So the cheaper the cigarettes, the more youth are going to smoke. CDC studies have concluded that for every 10% increase in price, there is a subsequent 6 to 7% reduction in youth use of cigarettes. And so the opposite is also true. If we allow these smuggled cigarettes, which are cheaper, into Maryland, it means that more kids have access to cigarettes and more kids will smoke. Moreover, black market cigarettes, as the Comptroller mentioned, are often sold at unlicensed retailers or out of the back of trucks or in trunks. And these places do not adhere to the state regulations regarding ID checks. And so the kids can very easily get cigarettes. When they have access to get cigarettes and the cigarettes are cheap, kids are going to smoke. Finally, cheaper cigarettes make it harder for existing smokers of all ages to quit. Last year in Maryland, 66% of smokers tried at least once to quit throughout the year. This was the highest rate in the country. However, less than 5% of these attempts were successful, in large part due to the availability of cheap smuggled cigarettes. So for these reasons, the Center for Tobacco Regulation strongly supports Senate Bill 69 and the Comptroller in his efforts to curtail smuggling in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, sir.
Happy to take questions. My favorite enforcement action for folks that wonder why this is more popular criminal activity than smuggling heroin. Last year, one of a court official in our state who processed these arrests of these cigarette smugglers, he himself began to smuggle cigarettes. We arrested him because he could see from the indictments and criminal papers he was drawing up how lucrative this was and how light the penalties are. So that's the problem that we have. Very lucrative contraband, very light slap on the wrist penalties. I think we've only arrested him 3 times. But this needs to go through. If I think later on this week the Senate is holding hearings on this, and hopefully the Senate can push this through. I have Mr. Kelly from our Enforcement Division, Mr. Folks, here to answer any questions you have, but we're happy to take any on now.
Comptroller, I have the